Satin is still singing, Shipwreck is still dancing, and the entire world is about to be plunged into darkness. But with all of that, is love somehow in the air? Because this might be the most romantic episode of G.I. Joe so far. It's part 4 of the Pyramid of Darkness. This is G.I. Retro.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
Yo, Joe, and welcome everyone back to G.I. Retro, where we are rewatching and celebrating each and every episode of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, the Sunbow run, and we're into part 4 of the Pyramid of Darkness miniseries, Chaos in the Sea of Lost Souls, or Chouse, if you caught that typo in the episode card of this episode, something I had never really noticed before going back to specifically rewatch for the show, but it's right there front and center, and I guess never been corrected. But anyway, let's dive in to the episode proper. We've got to pay off that cliffhanger from last episode. Remember, Alpine and Bazooka facing down those terrifying leopard seals, and I guess they were in need of a hero to save them, and they get it in the form of the debuting Quick Kick.
Stuck and out of luck. Row to shore. Look.
Quick Kick's official debut right here. Although I'm sure some of you with very sharp eyes probably noticed, it's actually not the first time that we've seen Quick Kick in the show. Earlier on in this miniseries was a wide shot after the attack on the G.I. Joe headquarters that we actually see Quick Kick in there. And we've talked a little bit about some of the production quirks with season 1, that this miniseries was actually being worked on after a lot of season 1 was already done or in the process of being finished. So easy to see how a sort of continuity incongruency like that could happen. But it's in this episode that we officially get Quick Kick. And let me know what you think about Quick Kick, because when we were talking about the greatest rivalries in the history of the cartoon show, Quick Kick and Storm Shadow came up quite a bit. And I've seen, in your correspondence with me here or also elsewhere in the G.I. Joe community online, it seems, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like Quick Kick has kind of a little bit, for lack of a better term, kind of a polarizing sort of effect on the fan base. So do you like Quick Kick? Do you not like Quick Kick? Let me know. I really like Quick Kick for the sort of old time movie aspect of him. I mean, we see in this episode him, dropping the sort of the John Wayne-esque lines, the Humphrey Bogart lines, which Casablanca being my all-time favorite movie, I certainly appreciate. So I like his old time Hollywood aesthetic, but let's get into what Quick Kick, after making the save for Alpine and Bazooka, he gets into a duel with Storm Shadow. Take a look.
Don't know the dude, Bazooka, but he's got a winning personality.
It's a very cool fight scene for Quick Kick and Storm Shadow. I was just saying, I really enjoy Quick Kick's character in terms of the old time Hollywood quirks and everything like that. But being totally honest, I don't like, and I have never liked, the fact that he bests Storm Shadow here so definitively. It's, going back to the previous miniseries with Storm Shadow and Spirit fighting to a standstill and everything like that. I really enjoyed that. I think I would have been more on board if Spirit had dispatched Storm Shadow in this way in the miniseries. But I don't know. There's just something about Quick Kick doing it here that he, to me, just never seemed to be on Storm Shadow's level in my mindset. And so I didn't really care for Quick Kick getting so the better of Storm Shadow here. Let me know what you thought about that, in terms of how you feel about Quick Kick overall and how you feel about him in terms of this fight with Storm Shadow. Because to me, Storm Shadow should be protected quite a bit. He shouldn't be losing very many fights at all, especially to another martial artist with a sort of similar fighting style. Storm Shadow should be right near the tippy top, and I think only probably losing to guys like Snake Eyes, but I don't think to Quick Kick. And I know it's GI Joe versus Cobra, and usually GI Joe is going to come out on top, but I feel like Storm Shadow needs a little bit more protection, and didn't really get it here. It was cool. It was cool animation, to be sure. One of my favorite parts of the episode, but the definitive victor for Quick Kick, I didn't care for so much. But regardless of how I feel, regardless of how you feel, Quick Kick, he did defeat Storm Shadow there, and he helps rescue Alpine and Bazooka. We'll pick back up with them much later on. But let's jump to the USS Flag, where Tomax is captured by G.I. Joe. And really, a lot of this episode is all about the Crimson Twins and their twin magic. So we're getting that right here with Tomax, trying to make his escape from the Joe team. It's a great scene. I like him with the Cobra emblem sort of acting as like a flashbang. And then he's doing all these superior acrobatic moves all over the place, trying to escape. Ultimately, G.I. Joe does bring him down and recapture him. But we see one of the instances where the twin thing, that twin magic, I believe the Corsican effect, actually benefiting Tomax and Zaymot here, because Zaymot, who is with Cobra, because G.I. Joe was having to be so rough and so physical with him, is able to pick up on where his whereabouts are and able to plan an escape attempt for him. So that's one of the things. Ordinarily, we see, one of the twins get decked, the other one feels it, and it sort of causes the whole battle to go against them. But here, it's actually in their favor, and I thought that was really cool and really interesting. This is definitely a big-time standout episode for the Crimson Twins. We'll pick back up on that rescue attempt in just a few minutes, but this also continue on with the story of Satin. And by the way, I loved seeing you all weigh in on last episode talking about Satin versus Cold Slither, the Cobra that got away, and all that good stuff. Little housekeeping note on there. Had a bit of an audio issue with the first export, so I had to pull the original video and re-upload one. So if you don't see your comment on there, no, I didn't delete it. No, didn't feel any type of way about anything you said. I liked all the comments. I screenshotted most of them before I had to re-upload the video. But if you want to go back and re-opine, I encourage you to do so. I'd certainly appreciate it. But if not, I do have screenshots of most of them to address on a future G.I. Joe mailbag. But let's get back into what's happening with Satin this episode. And Shipwreck and Snake Eyes. Remember, Satin last episode said, hey, you're going to have to trust me. They threw on some disguises. We get that payoff here as they are stopped at this Cobra checkpoint. Satin trying to sort of, big dog her way through the security, say, hey, we're entertainers. She's trying to pull the same card that she did last episode, which is like, Cobra Commander's my biggest fan. We're going to the Cobra Temple to perform. And if we're late, it's going to be on you, all this stuff. Troopers aren't really going for it as much here, but they sort of say, okay, well, if you're really this song and dance troupe, let's see it. And that is when we get another song and dance number from Satin and her dolls. I think this is probably everyone's favorite moment from the episode, or certainly the most memorable moment from the episode. I know it is for me. Satin once again breaking into song and performance, but this time she's got the whole crew, her dolls, really backing her up, with Shipwreck singing and playing that saxophone in full 80s disguise, Snake Eyes looking like Boy George coming off that tour bus, and even Timber and Polly fully in disguise and playing along. It's so totally bonkers. It's peak 80s G.I. Joe zaniness, but to me, it really works and it remains endearing for what it is. So I really enjoyed it. It continues on perfectly from what we saw last episode with them getting out of jams, and takes it up even to another level. So yeah, I really liked it. And it also brings us directly into our MIA for this week. This is definitely our missing in action figure. And I was talking about needing to add Colonel Slash and Satin into the line last week. And for Satin specifically, this is how you do it. This is how you bring Satin into the G.I. Joe line. You make a Comic-Con exclusive with her and with Shipwreck, Snake Eyes, Timber, and Polly dressed just like they are in disguise here. And you put that all in one beautiful box set. And that, that would be just to me a perfect Comic-Con exclusive. Wouldn't have fit necessarily with the original 80s line of G.I. Joes, but I think now what the exclusives should be are these kind of deep cuts, and I would be all about that. And it would really fit in with what Hasbro has done. I kind of don't get why they haven't done it yet, because we got, like I said, Cold Slither sort of so embraced and really pushed to the forefront by Hasbro, by Super 7, the G.I. Joe community at large. Seemed like the next logical step, sort of continuing on with that kind of theme, would be Satin and Shipwreck and Snake Eyes and this miniseries. This part of the Pyramid of Darkness really should be highlighted next. And I think it would fit in perfectly with what they've done. So that's our MIA for this episode, and a really fun part. And the diversion, the distraction of that incredible musical performance maybe didn't go perfectly to plan, but it did give them enough of an opportunity to subdue most of those Cobra troopers at the checkpoint. And of course, Polly and Timber more than pulling their weight per usual. Such great members of the G.I. Joe team are Polly and Timber, and they make a break for it in Satin's van. And I was struck by how this thing, it's like the Punisher van. I mean, able to withstand the blast of those Cobra troopers. She puts the armor down, blasts through the brick wall, and they are off to the races. She's going to drop off Shipwreck and Snake Eyes. She has her own path to follow. I'll circle back to that a little bit later on in the episode, but let's jump back over to the Crimson Twins, because Joemance is going to be making his rescue. He's found Joemance being held on the USS Flag and is able to rescue his twin brother.
Now, release the starflies.
Hey, look at the pretty butterflies.
Brother, now that we are reunited, we cannot fail.
Reunited, and it feels so good for the Crimson Twins. And I really liked how in this episode they lean in fully to that unique sort of speech pattern and dialogue that the Crimson Twins have, sort of finishing one another's sentences. It's something that has always stood out to me as so memorable, and we really get a lot of it here in this episode. Really getting a lot of the Crimson Twins in general, because after they're reunited, they escape the USS Flag. The Pyramid of Darkness gets completed. We've seen throughout this episode, Major Blood activated his control cube, Cobra Commander getting ready to activate the final one, courtesy of Destro and Baroness in that Sea of Lost Souls. We see them placing that one. Got a good little battle between Destro and Lady J there as well. Also another sort of name that came up during sort of the greatest rivals conversation in G.I. Joe. But it's with the Crimson Twins, who Cobra Commander was planning on betraying to cut them out of the action here. But it's actually the Crimson Twins getting to enact their own plot, their own double cross of Cobra Commander. They launched this flare, which apparently the Dreadnoks can see from Space Station Delta. And that is the signal that they were waiting for. The Dreadnoks and the Fatal Fluffies, not including Zartan in the plan, by the way, which I thought was interesting that, sort of his loyalty maybe was more to Cobra Commander than just being his own man in this instance. That was interesting because the Dreadnoks don't just betray Cobra Commander, they're also betraying Zartan here and throwing in their lot with the Crimson Twins, who now are running the show with this Pyramid of Darkness. It's like the GoldenEye, the EMP, nothing electrical is working. The world plunged into darkness, no electricity under the pyramid. And so Flint on the USS Flag, trying to find a solution, correctly points out that, hey, people are able to sail for a long time without electricity. And we got this really quick but I got a kick out of this interaction between Flint and Lady J.
Men sailed the seas before electricity, Admiral.
What do you mean, Flint?
Mother Nature, Lady J, Mother Nature. We'll harness the power of the wind.
Yes, the wind. But will it work?
It was super quick, and I don't think it's what was intended, but I can't help seeing that and feeling like the implication is that Lady J had no idea that boats used to sail around the ocean. Again, I don't think that's what was intended, but I don't know, maybe Lady J wasn't a history buff coming out of school, I guess. Anyway, the world is plunged into darkness. Flint has the flag rigged up with sails. The Crimson Twins, they have enacted their double cross. They make their way back to the Cobra Temple, and they're now running the show. Going back to Alpine, Bazooka, and Quick Kick, they're trying to make their escape in that giant Cobra jet. Again, that should have been a toy in the original line. We've seen it now in multiple miniseries, but I digress. The cliffhanger we get for this episode is them in that jet fighting with the Cobra troopers. Bazooka, who is still injured, forced into the controls, and the plane is going down. That is a cliffhanger. That is a better cliffhanger than the terrifying leopard seals, in my opinion. And once again, Alpine and Bazooka featuring in the cliffhanger. And, you know, really a big part of this miniseries are Alpine and Bazooka. So that is where we leave this episode. But we've got some more things to get to. And I teased it at the top that in spite of everything going on, is this the most romantic episode of G.I. Joe? And we get a few things that leads me to say that. Something with those control cubes has put love in the air. Let's go to the montage and we'll highlight all the romance in this episode at the top.
Now align the cube and bring us victory.
The taste of total victory is sweet, dear Baroness. Almost as sweet as you.
Oh, Destromio, how gallant.
You're on your own from here, guys. It was more monkeys than a barrel of laughs or something. Hasta la vista.
Satin, wait! Why don't you come with us and help whip Cobra?
I'd like that, Sailor Man. But I've got my own song to sing. You see, Cobra framed my father for crimes he didn't commit. And Dad never recovered. Well, maybe we'll get together again sometime.
The Cobra who got away.
Destro's going down to the cube. Wait!
Don't worry! I've been in worse times!
The Pyramid of Darkness may cancel out modern power sources, but it can't stop the Falcon Glider.
Don't forget about me!
I couldn't if I tried.
Polly wants bulletproof feathers!
The Cobra commander has pledged not to activate the fourth cube until we are safely away.
And you believe him? Of course not.
I wonder if I should begin with my back to the camera and then turn suddenly, or will a simple close-up be more dramatic?
So why do I say this is the most romantic episode of G.I. Joe so far? Well, we've got Destro and Baroness smooching on camera for the first time, them mooning over one another. I love Baroness calling him Destromio and saying he's so gallant. Fantastic. So we've got that. Then we've got a clearly love-struck Shipwreck chasing after Satin, not wanting her to go. And I love the little bit of backstory we got from Satin there, and that she's clearly pained in leaving Shipwreck, and hopefully, you know, they cross paths again down the line, but she has her own destiny and path that she has to follow. And then continuing on with the undeniable chemistry of Flint and Lady J, where after the Pyramid of Darkness is activated, saying, hey, don't forget about me. And Flint's like, as if I ever could. I'm in love with you, Lady J. And so that is why I make the argument that this is the most romantic episode of G.I. Joe so far. And with Destro and Baroness sort of hard launching in this episode, it's a good time to start thinking about your favorite Joemances. Are you Flint and Lady J? Are you Destro and Baroness? Scarlet and Duke? Scarlet and Snake Eyes? there's plenty to go around, plenty that that we will get into throughout the course of this show, but something to think about as we go. So yeah, something in the air in the Pyramid of Darkness that has people feeling a little lovey-dovey. And I also really liked Cobra Commander sort of debating his TV strategy, how he wanted to make his sort of most intimidating appearance on TV. It was just really great, classic Cobra Commander. And then once again with Flint, you'll be like, it can't stop the Falcon Glider. When, any of us that played with the Falcon Glider knows that, you can stop the Falcon Glider just by playing with it and getting torn to shreds. But at any rate, moving along, we've got some awards and hardware to hand out here before we get out of this edition of GI Retro. So let's go ahead and jump into the But Did You Die moment of the week.
Did you die? I got shot. But did you die?
Two primary candidates, in my opinion, for the DYD this week. We already talked about one a little bit, and that was Satin just driving straight through the barrage of those Cobra troopers through a brick wall, sort of inexplicably in this what seemed like a normal van. But I'm giving it to something else because at least we got the explanation that this was a secretly heavily armored van that Satin had going, kind of like a Punisher van, like I said. So going in a different direction, actually another sort of blink and you miss it type DYD, which happens a lot with this. But so when the final control cube gets activated, chaos breaking out everywhere, no matter how you spell it. And what caught my eye was this poor Sky Striker getting just absolutely obliterated. Control cube activates, just blasts this Sky Striker out of the sky. So that was the But Did You Die moment for me, because I don't think that pilot made it. But what caught your eye in this episode for the DYD? Let me know. And let's keep handing out the trophies and keep it rolling. Let's go right into the foul up of the week.
You're here because you're an industrial straight foul-up!
Thank you, Sarge. Okay, few contenders for foul up of the week. And let's once again go back to Satin, that performance with Shipwreck and Snake Eyes in disguise. Those Cobra troopers pretty easily distracted and then subdued. I mean, you've got a wolf in disguise, a parrot in disguise. They didn't really see through it probably as quickly as they should have, but hey, it was a crazy time in the 80s. So maybe they thought that was just par for the course and part of the act, although they should be a little embarrassed. And then he's not in the episode much, but when he was in it, he should feel definitely embarrassed. And that is Zartan, betrayed by his own band of mercenaries, selling him out to the Crimson Twins, his own dreadnoughts turning on him and getting captured. So Zartan definitely also a contender for foul up of the week. But ultimately who I went with, and I don't think it was particularly close, it's those sailors charged with guarding Tomax aboard the USS Flag, even more easily distracted than those Cobra troopers by some shiny butterflies. One of them literally saying, hey, look at the butterfly, and then bam, incapacitated. Zaymot is able to free his brother Tomax. Definitely the foul up of the week with severe repercussions because the control cubes get activated and now the Crimson Twins are on the loose and running Cobra.
Nobody ever suspects the butterfly.
I didn't burn down the school. It was the butterfly, I tell you. The butterfly!
He's crazy, boys. Get the taser.
And finally, where there's a foul up, there's got to be an MVP. So from the lowest of lows, let's go to the highest of highs and crown episode MVP.
On a night where you thought, well, he isn't quite himself. How good can you be? MVP.
Four-ish finalists, in my opinion, for MVP. First, we have Quick Kick, really strong debut. Whether you like it or not, he was able to take out Storm Shadow in a one-on-one duel, not to mention all those Crimson Guards as well. Rescued Alpine and Bazooka. drop some good quotes as well along the way. And then we've got Satin once again, the reigning MVP Satin, might I add, having another strong episode, though not quite as much of the focal point here, so not going to give it to Satin, but continuing to be a standout in this miniseries. She is. And then we've got Lady J, who also had a really good episode, going one-on-one with Destro underwater for that control cube and taking out his Robotopus and churning it against him. Ultimately, as Destro said, was too little too late, but really Lady J kind of getting the better of Destro here, which was well earned after Destro sort of having them at every turn. Of course, Destro gets away because the control cubes get activated, but Lady J was taking it to him there. But the MVP for this episode, it's not a first for having a dual MVP, but it's also not a tie in the same way it was last time. To me, the MVP of this episode are the Crimson Twins.
We now control Space Station Delta.
The Pyramid of Darkness.
The whole enchilada.
We had a tie before for MVP with Spirit and Storm Shadow in the previous miniseries, but a little different this time with Tomax and Xamot, the Crimson Twins, sharing the honors. What a great episode for them. They're such classic Cobra characters, and they got to spotlight all of that throughout the episode. Again, the quotes that they got to drop, I love that. The whole enchilada, the finishing one another's sentences, the twin magic actually helping them in this episode. And then after the control cubes get activated, they take over all of Cobra. So yeah, the Crimson Twins are going to be the MVPs for sure in this episode. But who is your pick for MVP, for Foul Up, DYD, and some of those other questions I asked? Like, what do you think of Quick Kick in his debut, his duel with Storm Shadow? And talk to me about some of your favorite Joemances, because that's something we're going to be going back to in the future here at GI Retro. So let me know your thoughts. And that is just about going to do it for this edition of GI Retro. Be sure to like, subscribe, and rewatch. I thank you all so very much for watching thus far and being a part of this great community. And when I talk to you next, we're going to be into part 5 of the Pyramid of Darkness, knotting Cobra's coils. I can't believe we're getting ready to close out the third miniseries. But until then, if you didn't know, now you know. Take it away, Flint.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!